Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Brain Attack Music. Who are you? Who am I? It's an interesting question. I don't mean to be flippant when I ask the question, but one of the issues I think we face, us brain injury survivors, is our sense of identity post brain injury. Pre brain injury, we probably know who we are. And I think most people identify their own personal image, for want of better expression, with their job, with their career. Well, this is who I was. If you'd have asked me, dodgy left hand, sorry. If you'd have asked me before I had my brain injury, before I had my stroke, who I was, I would have said, I'm a musician, I'm a drummer. That's what I was doing before I had my stroke. I was playing in bands, I was teaching in a couple of schools, I was teaching privately in my home studio, and that, I suppose, defined me. And I really struggled, probably for 2 or 3 years after my stroke and brain surgery, struggled to define who I was. So it's quite common, I think, to meet people and we engage in conversation and we say, "Oh, what do you do?" Or, "I'm an accountant, I'm a dentist, I'm a teacher, I work in a shop," whatever. And of course, post brain injury, for many of us, our job opportunities, our career has disappeared. So, who are we? How do we identify with ourselves? And when asked the question by other people, "What do you do?" what do we say? This really struck me when we moved from the south of England to up here in Scotland, because the Scots, in general, don't ask you, "What do you do?" Whereas down south, the south of England, it's very much about what you do, how big is your house, how many holidays do you have, what sort of car do you drive, and all of this gives the inquirer an idea about your, for want of a better expression, social standing. Oh, you have a 4-bedroom house, do you? Oh, 2-bedroom house. Oh, 1 holiday a year, 2 holidays a year. It all gives a gauge of your net worth. It's very much a financially based decision. Nobody, since we've been living in Scotland, which is 4 years now, nobody has asked me what I do. The standard question is, where do you stay? Now, that means, where do you live? Oh, we live such and such. Oh, right, okay. So for the past 4 years, I haven't had to deal with the "what do you do" question, because that had me scratching my head. Because what I tended to do when asked the question, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I used to." Who are you? Well, I had a stroke. What's that? Well, you see, there are 2 types of stroke. You can have a bleed, that's a hemorrhagic stroke. You can have a clot, that's an ischemic stroke. That's what I had. Yeah, that's not going to go down too well, is it? Who are you? Well, I used to be a drummer. Oh, interesting. What do you do now? Well, I've had ill health and I'm recovering from ill health. Oh, what was the problem? Well, I had a stroke and I had to have brain surgery, and yeah. So the whole idea of working out who I was again was a real challenge. And in addition, with all that sense of personal identity, in addition to that, obviously, we, our stroke survivors, brain injury survivors, are dealing with all the mental, physical, and emotional issues that we have to contend with, which obviously will vary from case to case. So there's a lot of sorting out to be done in our heads in many ways for many different things. A lot of things change post the event. That can be, obviously, we're talking about career, that can be relationships, friends, family members, all sorts of things can go on. My wife spent quite a lot of time in sales and marketing, and she has a thing about an elevator pitch. What's your elevator pitch? Tell me in 30 seconds about X, Y, or Z. So the analogy is you meet somebody in a lift, as we would say in the UK. I guess it's an Americanization, so elevator, but we would say a lift. So you meet somebody in a lift, and you're only in there for 30 seconds until you either leave or they leave. What's your quick pitch to that person about whatever it is you want to pitch to them? In this example, we're talking about us. So what would you say to somebody given 30 seconds to say about you? Well, I used to. No, you can't say that. You can't say I used to do it. What are you doing now? And this leads me on to a whole different thing, which is we talk about, I want my old life back. Oh, I just want to do the things that I used to be able to do. And for many of us, we can't do that. Here I am coming up for 8 years, and lots of things I've had to kiss goodbye to. Playing golf, just as a hobby. Can't do it. I mentioned in one of my other videos that I saw a clinical psychologist. I actually saw two. Actually, I saw one up here in Scotland, and the first one I saw was when we were living just near Oxford, down the south of England. And at the stage I saw the first clinical psychologist, I was convinced I was going to make a full recovery and I was going to be back identifying as a musician before too much longer. I hadn't really fully understood at that stage what had happened to me and the amount of brain damage that I had and the effect that was going to have on me. The fact that verbally and cognitively I'm reasonably okay, physically not so much. So he was really good. He kind of got me to think about, well, maybe you need to think about going back to work part-time as opposed to full-time. Maybe you need to think about doing something different to what you can do at the moment. Maybe you might eventually have to come to terms with the fact that you just can't work. So he gradually sort of talked me down from my lofty ideals of going back to doing this full time. And that takes time to process, that takes time to understand that, and that takes time to onboard, to, for want of a better expression, upload the software to your brain to actually get it working and understand what it means. And in that intervening period between believing that I was going to go back to who I was 100% and probably 3 or 4 years later coming to terms with the fact that I wasn't, over that period of time was a lot of adjustment. So I was thinking things like, well, okay, so maybe I say to people I'm semi-retired. Why are you semi-retired? Oh, well, due to ill health. And we kind of leave it there. So there's ways of, if you like, reframing who you are. And I would ask each and every one of you to really think about that, really think about who you are rather than who you were. Because it's very easy to think back. And I know in my early stages, the first year or two following my stroke, I would couch myself, my thoughts in around who I was, who I used to be. What I did was, what I used to do was past tense. And it helps to reframe that into present tense, what I am, what I do, and to think about the future, what I want to be, what I will be, what I will become, what I want to do. Those goals aren't necessarily going to be achieved, but at least we have goals and at least we're thinking ahead. But really, we have to leave the past behind, and that's tough to do. Very easy to sit here nearly 8 years later and go, oh yes, you've got to leave the past behind, but very hard to do, because what identifies us, or what we identify as identifying us, might be career. Oh, I'm a software developer. Well, I used to be a software developer. I used to be a software engineer. I used to be, no, I can't keep saying used to be, that's past tense. But generally it's our careers that identify us, or how we identify with ourselves. So since we've been in Scotland, I haven't had to come out with the, oh well, I'm retired, which is what I say now if asked. I'm retired. Now that's easy for me to say because I'm 63 in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks I think. But that's easy for me to say because if I was 25, 30, it's not quite so easy to look at somebody straight in the eye and say, I'm retired. So you have to kind of think of a different way of phrasing it and all the rest of it. But generally, if asked now, I say I'm retired. And if somebody says to me, oh, you look a bit young to retire, I say, yeah, actually retired due to ill health. And I'll leave it there, because most people don't ask more than that. If they do, I'll tell them, but if not, I'll leave it there. So I would encourage you to try and leave the past behind. Yes, of course we want to try and relive the past, regain that's what we know. This is what I knew. Not so much now. I'm more distant from it. I still have a kit. I can still play. I can probably play to about 70-80% of my previous capability. And left hand's a bit iffy when it comes to doing more intricate stuff. But the problem is in here. So I can send commands to my limbs, and with drumming you need right hand, left foot, right foot. All 4 limbs are used. I can send commands to my limbs and they won't necessarily respond at the same speed and in the same place. So doing basic stuff is kind of okay. The minute I start to try and do stuff a little bit more complicated, the timing goes, at least I know the timing goes. You may hear it and think, oh, sounds okay to me, but I can hear the timing goes. And in addition to that, I can only last about 20 minutes and then my brain melts. Just the whole mental rigour of doing what I'm doing. Physically, it's okay, I could keep going, but mentally I'm shot. So this as a career now is out of court for me. But we need to think of ways of how we reframe and redefine who we are that isn't based on who we used to be. And moving from who we used to be and how we identified with ourselves to who we are and how we identify with ourselves now takes time. In my case, I reckon it took probably 3 or 4 years. So don't think this is something you wake up one day and go, oh, I get it, I'm now whatever. It doesn't work like that. It takes time. But do give some thought to your sense of identity, because we all have a bit of an identity crisis going on, and most of that is predicated on who we were as opposed to who we are or who we want to be going forwards. Anyway, I'd be interested in some feedback from you, what you guys think, what your experiences have been, whether you identify with some of the points that I've made in this video or not, as the case may be. So please leave your comments below, and if you want to subscribe to the channel, click on the subscribe icon, and if you want to be alerted to when I post new videos, which I try and do once a week or so, then click on the notification, the bell icon, and you'll be alerted. Thanks for watching. Look after yourselves. Cheers for now. Bye bye.